What I've learned in this situation is that, boy, love really does conquer all. And I've been amazed at the creative ways that families have engaged, to stay connected with their loved ones.
Welcome to our second episode of Aging Choices Unfiltered. I'm Terry Sullivan, the co-founder of Aging Choices, and I'm joined by my co-host and co-founder, Brenda Lamone.
Hi, everybody.
We developed this podcast, Aging Choices Unfiltered, to help educate older adults and their families on senior care topics. Over the next few months, we'll be releasing a new series about the power of planning for senior care. On today's show, we're going to take an in-depth look at the steps senior living communities are taking to combat coronavirus. We will be joined by Brenda Abbott-Shultz, Vice President of Resident Services with Sagora Senior Living. So sit back while we shed some light on this ever-evolving topic and uncertainty that we're all living in right now. Bren, my dad had, I don't know if you do know, I don't know if I told you, but my dad had surgery yesterday. He had a device put in his heart yesterday, and they kept it scheduled. I was really shocked that they kept it scheduled because all I could think of was, with everything that's going on right now, why would my dad, who's 75 years old, be in the hospital right now? Especially with everything going on. But they did. They went through the surgery. He did fine. Everything's great. But the reality is we're in this pandemic. There's a lot going on. But senior services and senior needs and people's needs for senior living doesn't end. There's still people who need services out there, but we're in this really strange time. And Brenda, I think you're seeing it with your parents in senior living as well. What are you seeing on your side with regards to visitation and other things?
As you know from the past podcast, my parents are in independent living, and my mom and my dad is in memory care. And at first they did quarantine the memory care, and they are serving everyone within their rooms, and they're not eating in the common areas anymore. And then they did shut down the entire campus, even the independent living, to protect the residents. And now the dining halls are all shut, and they can pick up food, but it's still, even though there's 2,000 residents on the campus, they're all very lonely because they're really confined to their apartments. So it's had a huge impact. Thank goodness we have the phone. So I get a call from my mother pretty much every day to give me a play-by-play. But I'm really excited to have Brenda Abbott-Shultz on to tell us a lot more about really what's going on in the communities from a provider's perspective. So we don't want to confuse you with all the Brendas, but I'm really excited to have Brenda Abbott-Shultz here.
Yeah, so Brenda's been kind enough, Brenda Abbott-Shultz, Vice President of Resident Services at Sagora Senior Living out of Fort Worth, Texas, was kind enough to spend a little time with us to shed some light on the steps that senior living communities are taking to help with this pandemic or coronavirus, whether it be impacting the residents or families or even their employees. So Brenda, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you, Terry and Brenda Lamone, for inviting me to be part of this. This is super important, and I'm, happy to take time out of my day anytime if I can, educate the general public about, what we're doing in senior living to ensure our residents and our associates are as safe as possible during these really challenging times.
That's fantastic. I think what might be helpful is just to give, if you could, for our listeners, can you give them just a little bit of your background and tell us a little bit about yourself?
I can tell you that I am a registered nurse. I have been in the senior living industry my entire career. I actually started out when I was 14 volunteering in a nursing home that my mom worked in, and those were the days where your parents could take you to work and put you to work for free. So I went every Saturday and volunteered and just loved it, and discovered that, my knack was with seniors. It's who I loved. They were my grandparents because I didn't have any, and always gave me such sage advice and wisdom that, I take to this day today with my 3 kids. So that's where I started, and realized that I wanted to dedicate my career to seniors and to ensuring that they had the quality of life that they deserved to have. So that's what I've been doing my entire career, senior living. Haven't worked in any other industry. Worked in a variety of positions at community levels, corporate levels, again, just trying to make a difference in, the way our seniors age and how others perceive them to be aging. So that's a little bit about me.
That's awesome. And, just before we get started, I think it's important for our listeners to know also where you are now. Can you tell us just a little bit about Sagora Senior Living, and just at a high level, the type of services that you offer?
Yeah, so Sagora Senior Living has been in existence for over 15 years, and we operate 44 communities in about 5 different states: Florida, Oklahoma, Alabama, California, and Texas. The bulk of our communities are in Texas, and we operate independent living, assisted living, and memory care communities. We serve about 5,000 residents across those 5 states.
Okay, great. So, let's get into the topic of why we're speaking and why listeners they're going to want to hear this information. So we might as well jump right in. So, I have the first question here, which is, when did Sagora Senior Living start to get serious about the coronavirus?
We started really getting serious about the coronavirus February 21st, actually. Mm-hmm. That's when I sent the first memo out to all of our communities saying, hey, this is in the United States, and it may not be a big deal, but we need to start taking precautions and start doing things now just in case it does. The good news about all of this was that I had experience with the swine flu working for a senior living company back in 2009. And all of the prep that we did for that. And of course, we wound up getting a vaccine, and all of our preparation, we didn't have to take advantage of it, so to speak. With the coronavirus, I was hoping it would be the same way. And we would just start getting all of our preparations in place, and just in case, with the hopes and expectations that, the CDC would come up with something and we'd be fine. And here we are today.
Yeah, very unsettling place overall. What are you and Sagora Senior Living and the teams doing there? What steps are you taking? Maybe you could walk us through some of the things that you're doing to help protect your residents. And then we could always talk about, serving your family and communication as well as your employees. So I'll take your lead on maybe how the best you might want to approach that.
Yeah, I'm happy to walk through, some of the steps that we've taken ourselves. Yeah, the challenge for us has been, of course, in senior living, we have our state, senior living, the departments of health, they call them various things in various states. And then we also have our local departments of health within each of our communities, the counties that they are in. So, and then we have the CDC, of course, in the federal government. And so we were anticipating back in February when, we got rumblings that, it's here in the United States now. And we started thinking more seriously and aggressively about what we were going to do to ensure our residents were safe and our associates were safe. We weren't getting any guidance from the CDC. We weren't getting any guidance from the state or local departments of health. And so we, questioned ourselves and said, okay, we're looking at, screening everyone who comes into the community. We're looking at saying, if you're not essential to be in the community, maybe we start restricting people who are in the community.
Yeah.
And so without that direction, we're like, oh my gosh, maybe we are being too aggressive. And, when the executives of the company sat down and said, we know that persons 65 and older are the most vulnerable to this virus. We also know that the mortality rate of persons 80 and older who get it are at 15%.
Yeah.
We said, we are obligated to ensure that we do everything that we can to protect our residents. And so we started this back at the end of February. And we started with the screening. At that time, it was, have you been to China? Do you have the fever and the cough and the shortness of breath? If you do, you can't come in and visit.
Some of our listeners, hey Brenda, some of our listeners, they may not understand that there are more than just families visiting, coming into these communities. You may have some folks that specialize in rehab or some type of therapies. Can you just tell our listeners, the types of folks that would come in and out of an assisted living community or even an independent living community?
That is a great point, Terry. Our communities are, they're very active and vibrant communities. We have nurses and doctors and physical therapists and occupational therapists, speech therapists. We have volunteers. We have entertainers coming in. We have the hairdresser, the massage therapist, the mailman, the mail person, you name it. We have people, in and out of our communities all day long.
Which really makes the exposure risk high. So, which makes sense. Then you would start to screen. It makes total sense.
Yeah. And so at, the end of February, beginning of March, we said, okay, who do we think are essential? And we had to define who essential versus non-essential was. And I think it hurt people's feelings when we said, we're sorry, you're non-essential.
Yeah.
Because, everyone truly coming into our community is essential. I mean, tell our 85-year-old resident who's been to the beautician, every week her entire life that the beautician's not essential. She's going to tell us otherwise.
She sure is.
And she has.
Talk about unfiltered. Yeah.
That's funny.
Right. Exactly.
Oh, too funny.
So it was an agonizing exercise to go through, because every person that, we had to eliminate, we knew would have a negative impact on at least one, if not many, of our residents.
Sure.
But again, we kept the goal in mind that, we were going to try to prevent all of our residents from getting sick. And so, who is going to multiple communities? That was one of the screening criteria we looked at. Who's going from our community to the skilled nursing facility down the street, to the assisted living facility, across town. Those were the people that we really wanted to limit access to our residents, because, quite honestly, they were all over the place.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And limiting the folks that are coming in to only essential people. With your residents and your families, as you're reducing the amount of folks that allowed in the community, including family members at some point, I know I've heard some communities that aren't even allowing visitation now, especially in memory care. How do you address the anxiety or panic that families might be feeling? How are you communicating with them as a service provider?
Yeah, that was, when I talk about all, it's just a series of agonizing decisions that we have to make with this dang virus. And that was one of them, was at what point do we say to family members, you can't visit any longer because you could be a carrier of the virus into our community. And we had to make that decision. We held off as long as we could.
Yeah.
There were other senior living companies who had already closed their communities off to all visitors. And we waited about an extra week and just said, okay, we're going to have to do this. And this is going to have a huge impact on not just our residents, but our family members. And you're right. There's a lot of anxiety and panic around this, because now families who are accustomed to visiting, sometimes daily, sometimes several times a day, to be with their loved ones are no longer able to do that. And they're saying, what the heck is going on? You know, do you have a problem in your community? Is it there? What are you doing?
Yeah.
And, you know, one of the tones that we've taken early on with this was, you know, a very calm and education type of tone. So we wanted to get the facts out there early on. There was lots of misinformation about what, you know, COVID-19 was, what it wasn't, how you could cure it. I mean, there were people on Facebook and the internet saying, you know, drink, you know, a diluted bleach solution and, you know, you won't get it. Yeah, just lots of craziness. And so our tone early on was, let's just focus on the facts around education, and let's focus on prevention. Those were our two primary areas that we focused all of our efforts. And we educated families, we educated residents, we educated our staff. Our education continues to today through letters, through emails, through phone calls, through social media. Thank goodness we're really leveraging the benefits of social media to get, you know, our perspective out there, what's going on in our communities, what's not going on in our communities, because now that our residents and our communities are so isolated, you know, we need that virtual connection into and out of the community so that people know what's happening.
For sure. Even from a personal perspective, I imagine FaceTime and other technologies have, you know, helped those families to connect. Is there anything within your communities that you're doing specifically that helps keep those families at least having some connection with the residents, whether it be telephone or FaceTime or other things like that?
Yeah, and you exactly mentioned those. We're using FaceTime, we're using Skype. Our associates all have, you know, their own personal phones, whether it be their Apple phones or what have you. So we're Skyping. We have iPads all over. We have computers all over that our residents can come to and say, you know, I want to see my loved one. Can you connect me with them? So we're really leveraging the technology that's out there to keep them connected. Mm-hmm. It's not the same, certainly, as being there and you know, just the wonderfulness that human touch is. Yeah. But this is, you know, this is a way to kind of bridge that gap. And I have to tell you, you know, one of the unintended results in this situation, what I've learned in this situation is that, you know, boy, love really does conquer all. And I've been amazed at the creative ways that families have engaged, you know, to stay connected with their loved ones. We have families still showing up to visit, but they're visiting outside of their loved ones, you know, window to the courtyard or window to the outside, and, you know, talking through the window and showing up with signs and, you know, showing up with care packages that our associates can give to their loved ones. So, boy, love always finds a way. And, you know, I think it's going to be fine in the end.
It feels in some sense like for society in general, this kind of pause in the craziness of life where we've all had to do the social distancing and work from home is it's almost like a reset button a little bit, it really makes you look at what's really important. And then we're all coming together to try to figure this out. And I did see a picture on Facebook of a son sitting outside of a window talking to his parent through the window. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is, we do what we need to do, which is really interesting.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Brenda.
I have taught my mother how to FaceTime. So, but I was trying to have a glass of wine with her via FaceTime, but I was getting dizzy because she kept moving the phone around.
Well, it's so funny, and that is so true, Brenda, because, I have family all over the country, and my niece and I have Wine Wednesday together. And in the evenings, we FaceTime each other and we share a glass of wine together and catch up. It's a great thing.
Yeah. Well, we're all finding that now. We're all working from home and doing everything remotely. And I wish I could I'm going to have her do it on her iPad. It would be a little bit bigger, but it's
so you can be more dizzy.
Yeah, I know. Even when it's thank goodness she knows some technology. It does help. It does help keep us connected. But with the common areas now, Brenda, do you find that the residents able to go into the communal areas like dining and computer labs and things like that, or is that off limits now?
The communal areas internally are not completely off limits. Unfortunately, the dining process is. We're looking at, social distancing and making sure, people are, staying apart, making sure that we keep our groups limited to, 10 or less. So we are delivering meals in everybody's rooms, or they can pick up their meals, what have you. The computer lounges are available. We just, limit the how many residents we have in the computer lounges at once. And we have a lot of our associates who go and do one-on-one Skype visits, using their phones or what have you with the residents and the residents' family. But, still have residents going outside. That's the interesting thing, is that we're not allowing non-essential people into the community. And certainly we don't want our residents leaving the community to potentially be exposed, but there's still no reason why they can't go out into the courtyard and enjoy the beautiful, sunny day and start gardening and doing all of those things that they were planning on doing anyway. They're still doing a lot of that. They're still walking their dogs around the communities, and they're still taking advantage of the pools and swimming in the pools. We're just, being more mindful of how many people are together at one time in one place.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Are you, there are families out there right now that are probably investigating senior living, and may have even been in the process until this happened, and may have stopped their search or even stopped their buying process around it. How are you at Sagora Senior Living handling those new inquiries now? Have you stopped tours? Are you doing remote meetings with customers? How are you handling that? Or do you know? If you don't, that's fine too.
No, that's a really great question, and I do know because I'm reviewing all potential move-ins to the company to make sure that they're appropriate. So yeah, we've stopped all tours. We stopped that several weeks ago, and again, it's just a matter of who's coming into the community, who's potentially been exposed. We want to limit that. And unfortunately, that's tours too. We don't know what their history is.
Yeah.
But doing lots of, phone, we're getting creative. We're doing virtual assessments, again, FaceTime and Skype and some of those other services where our nurses can be at the community and the family is there and allowing us to look at the resident and talk to the potential resident. So that's working. We have put a pause on all of our move-ins.
Okay.
Yeah, we have. We felt like it was the right thing to do. Now, the one exception that we've made, because we do have a lot of people who are in process or who were in the process of coming to us. Some of them had already moved their furniture in and everything. And for those persons who are already in process, we're taking on a case-by-case basis, but we are doing a reevaluation of them and saying, okay, where have they been? Who have they been around? A lot of them have just been at home. And, the reason they're coming to us is because they were socially isolated before the whole virus happened. And so they're particularly safe and haven't been, exposed. So we are moving, those persons in on a case by case. And we've also received calls from frantic family members saying, I don't live in the same state as my mom or my dad, and they're home alone, and I'm worried about them getting out and getting food. I'm worrying about them getting exposed. They've been told to stay home and quarantine, but, I don't know if they have what they need to do that. And so in those situations, we've said, this is a life safety issue for these people. And, being with us is way better than being at home alone and working through this on their own. So for those people who have those situations, we're also looking at moving them in as needed.
Yeah. I mean, there's a whole human component to this, right? And there's all kinds of needs. And like I was saying earlier in the podcast, is these needs don't go away because we've all paused, in some way, shape, or form to do social distancing or change. I mean, these folks still need care. Some of the folks, have you done any in-home? I know people that live in your communities, it is their home, but have you done any home visits outside of the community when a family member or someone calls in saying they have someone who needs some help, and you do a little bit of servicing at their home until they are ready to move in? Have you seen anything like that?
I haven't seen anything like that. Certainly, our company has not done anything like that. In some situations, we've done meal drops where we've dropped food on their front porches and let them know that we've left a few days worth of meals for them.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Until they're able to move in. The other thing, I think what you said is really spot on in terms of, life doesn't just stop because of this. We have residents in our communities who are actively dying, and they have hospice services that are there with them. We consider them essential services. And, we're also looking at and have looked at and have had family members come in and spend those last moments, those last days with their loved ones because, it's just so important for them to be part of that. So we get creative and we figure out, okay, we assume everyone coming into the community is, is infected. And we say, okay, how can we, protect everyone from this person? And we screen them and we have them wash their hands and we have them immediately go to the residence room without talking to anyone. And once they're in their loved one's room, then they spend all the time they need and want with them. So it doesn't stop. It doesn't pause. We have to be creative in how we deal with these very real human issues.
Sure. Is there anything, as we start to wrap up our conversation, is there anything that you'd like to share with our listeners that you think is important that we didn't cover, or anything that you want to share?
I would say just my recommendation is to follow the facts. I feel that we've gotten our direction this entire time, our information from the CDC and the World Health Organization. We haven't gotten our facts from Congress or the president or any, political person or any, state directives. We've really stuck to what is the CDC saying? What is the World Health Organization saying? What can we expect, and what do we need to do? So that would be my first thing, is just really follow the facts. Mm-hmm. And constantly educate yourself. You know, the one thing about this virus that's been amazing to me is things are changing so quickly with what we know about it. It's almost like a daily, okay, we know this is how long it takes to transmit. We know this is how long it lives on this surface. So, you know, constantly stay up to date and educated. And the other thing I would say is keep vigilant in following the community guidelines. You know, we're not the enemy. Sometimes, you know, especially during this time, people are very angry with us. People are, you know, family members are upset with us. Doctors are upset with us because this isn't your usual routine. This isn't what we normally do. And we have to figure out what our new norm is every day in our communities. And how are we going to ensure our residents and our associates are safe and well and insulated from this virus? Not all of our decisions are going to be popular. But at this point, the decisions that we're making come from a good place. It comes from a place of protection, and just hoping that family members understand that and partner with us to get through this, get to the other side of this, so life for all of us can return to normal.
Yeah, it's a big change. And what is that new normal, right? We'll go forward a little different from this, that's for sure. But Brenda, Brenda Lamone, is there anything else you want to ask Brenda Abbott-Shultz before we end our podcast?
No, I just want to thank Brenda for sharing with us. I think it was really valuable information. It really was great to hear from the provider side. I've been on both sides of the fence myself, but you know, having my parents in this situation has been very difficult. But I really commend the care managers and the caseworkers and the staff at these communities that are going into work in these environments and you know, on the front lines every day, like the people in the hospitals. And I just give them all so much credit. So as I spoke to someone earlier, I do want to call and see how my dad is, you know, but I also know that they're so short staffed and they're all trying to get, you know, make it all happen. So I don't want to be a burden. I know they're keeping them safe, but I'm sure it's a very confusing time for the residents, and they have their hands full with that. So thank you very much, Brenda.
For sure.
Yeah, thanks for joining us today, Brenda. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
It was absolutely our pleasure, and I think that a lot of our listeners were going to gain a lot from this, so we appreciate it. Coming up on the next episode of Aging Choices Unfiltered, we'll be joined by Michelle Woodbury, CEO of Two Sisters Senior Living Advisors, as we examine the factors that go into the decision of whether to look at home care or transition to a senior living community. And we want to hear from you. This isn't just our show about senior care options. This is your show. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Aging Choices, and Twitter at My Aging Choices, and tell us what topics you'd like us to talk about. And please visit agingchoices.com for a full library of senior care resources and our Choice Wizard. Explore, review, select senior living, aging care, and service options for free with the Choice Wizard. Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed the show.